We look at the role of women in our society and how can we make our business sector and our boardrooms more equitable. I don't need to tell you how many of our boards and the management of firms are still dominated by men. One person who's shattered many glass ceilings in her time, in many places, is the businesswoman Gloria Serobe. Played an important role in business in our society and in other sectors. She's now published a book about the person she says was her mentor, her mother-in-law, Winnie Serobe. Gloria Serobe joins us now. Gloria, good afternoon. Thanks so much for coming in.
Good afternoon, Stephen. Good afternoon.
How important is it to have a mentor? We all know that we want to change the look, the complexion, the thoughts sometimes of leaders, of boardrooms. How important is mentorship in doing that?
Mentorship assumes that you are getting into a territory you're not quite familiar with, and therefore you need somebody to hold your hand and take you through the narrow corridors and teach you the ropes about how that works. And most of the times when mentorship throws in you the lifeline in terms of her or his networks so that you can be plugged into an existing system. That's what mentorship is supposed to do. Of course, teaching you the job and all of that.
You wrote about your mentor, someone who wasn't really a business person, but played an immense role in her own way, was a leader in her own right. How was Winnie Serobe your mentor?
You get into marriage. In my case, I wasn't married before, so it was my first marriage. God knows, I hope it's the last one. That's 36 years ago. I didn't know much about marriage. But the interesting thing about marriage is that you are getting into an existing system of family with their own value system and cultures and traditions, and you need to be integrated into this and be part of it. Being part of it also means that you need to understand it, because you come from wherever you come from. You are joining this large system of over so many years. And to understand it, it helps a lot. If you have somebody who has been in the same path as you are starting to take. And in my mind, the person who's been in this road before is your mother-in-law. My husband was 28 years, and my mother-in-law has been there almost 30 years already. So I can't think of anyone who had to drop herself into this system, and 30 years later you find yourself and you're looking for a mentor. I can't think of a better mentor. She too came from outside, and she's joining into a particular family system. And the fact that she's here 30 plus years later, it means she has managed the system. She knows it very well. I can't think of a better person to hold her hand in that world of marriage.
Does what works in a family and in marriage also hold true for business? You need the help of an insider?
My view is that you do. And we tend to think that in business, yes, you must. And we think that in marriage, you can somehow wing it. And because you're in love and all of that kind of thing, you're joining a family that has got existing ways of doing things. And there is an expectation that you're also here to be part of the building this family and make it a better family. And so you can't build something you don't know. And so in my mind, you have to have an idea of what kind of family system is this. Even if you have the opportunity later to enhance some of the things because life changes. But the foundation, the base of it is the same. And especially with the traditions. They don't change every year. It's not like a strategy session, what we do now with death and marriage and birth. So you have to understand it very well, even if you have the opportunity to enhance it. The starting point is you understand it, you know it, you respect it as well. And so for me, and that is how a mother-in-law comes into the system, that you have to make an assumption that the guy you're so in love with to such an extent, that's his mother. He believes in her mother, the mother believes in her son, and you are coming in. But, you know, typically the narrative around mothers-in-laws and daughters-in-law is a horrific one. It almost looks like the first woman you want to kill as soon as you join this family is this woman who's been in the same path as you are starting to do some many years ago.
Winnie Serobe must have led a life different to yours, and quite, considering the time, a very hard life for a black woman. She did very important things, despite the fact that the system was very much against her.
Yes, herself, she was a qualified nurse, and which was a strong career at the time. And for those who know, nursing had like difficult times. Like a night nurse, you know, the ones that start at 7 p.m., come back at 7 a.m. or start 7 a.m. and come back 7 p.m. So if you think about it, that career was very hard to be able to build a family life because you've got children, they're going to school, you are in the hospital overnight, and so on and so on. So the question of her being a career woman and having to straddle bringing up 5 children in the process, and still have time, a lot of time to do community work because the time demanded that. Lots of social issues to deal with. She wanted every child to go to school. She wanted to deal with the Housewives League, the Black Consumer Union, Ikageng, YWCA, all of those things, because each of these NGOs and organizations were dealing with something very deep, which is troubling the community from which she came from. So she's a community worker. She is a nurse by profession. She's also a wife and a mother, and all of that. And she has to carry the family in terms of the traditions and the systems and the value systems. You can't not learn from somebody like that. And her sympathy for her daughters-in-laws, I think, came from that. She understood exactly that in building your career, you are also bringing up a young family. It's very difficult. And so when she could, she actually gave of herself to make it work for us in terms of being a support system and all of that.
I think when people look for mentors, there's a tendency to think that my mentor must look like me, you know, that's the person I need to emulate. I think sometimes white men, older white men who've been in the system for a long time, might be a bit afraid to go to a younger black woman and sort of offer, you know, to be a mentor. They might be a bit nervous to do that. And I think that's quite a complex position sometimes. People are scared of being accused of maybe patronizing someone younger than them. At the same time, you know, the people in the system know the system, and sometimes those are white men.
My mentor that I mentioned everywhere I go is Jacob Marie. He was a young CEO of Standard Corporate Merchant Bank, and he ended up being a CEO of Standard Bank. He was very young, 30-something years old, extremely white. Being Jacob Marie means he was very white, and I was very black. And he was comfortable to actually hold our hands and take us through the system. My other mentor is also a man. If you take a Wiseman Nkutlu, this one is a very pitch black man. He's the first African to qualify as a CA in the country, was a professor at my university, and he felt strongly about the accounting profession. So these 2 mentors I'm mentioning are men. And there should be no such a thing about you must be like me to be, you must just be what it is. Because I'm not learning to be like you, by the way. I'm just learning to be in that place where you are.
When I look at young people now, so people much younger than me, I sometimes think that it should, on paper, be easier The country's never been as free as it is now. We've never had as many programs in place to help young black people get basic education, higher education, and into jobs. And yet, I don't think it is easier. It seems to me, from what I hear from young people, to be incredibly difficult, especially for young black people, because they don't have the networks, for many reasons. They come from very difficult backgrounds, and they're supposed to sort of play, almost act, I suppose, like a middle-class person in an office in a way. Where have we gone wrong in this? Why is it so difficult when it should, on paper, be easier than it's ever been? And yet I don't think it is.
I think we underestimate the fact that the changes also came with South Africa being also in the global stage. So we kind of stuck before that. So South Africa is competing to be the first choice for investment capital decisions, for example. And so the environment is very much different. What then it means is that the competition is very high, is very tight, because we're not only competing amongst ourselves, we're competing with the rest of the world. And so the thing we have to straddle there is, as we do that, which we should, South Africa must win against everyone in the world. As we do that, we must also be mindful of that our own pipeline, our own timber is made of both black and white. And let us make use of the fact that we've got black professionals, we've got young professionals, we've got women professionals. Let's give of our best as this country, just to say that, for example, and this is where the lack of transformation gets to be trouble. When we sit with people from Sweden or Germany, they're quite comfortable to talk about their own roots and all their, have you been to Germany? And they talk about the Bavaria functions and wearing their own outfits. In South Africa, we're not, because we are quite keen to be seen as everything else but our own things. So this transformation thing, we're losing it in the sense that we are not making use of our own diversity. Because we think that diversity means weakness, diversity means corrupt, diversity means all these things. Point of the matter is that 40% of the country is rural, and our opportunities are in the rural areas. But who's taking advantage of the rural opportunities are people from outside of South Africa. And South Africans are still shy of going there where people don't go. So I think we need to see that diversity and transformation as the perfect opportunity to win. And we need to have long conversations around that and just make sure that we're taking advantage of our own backlog, because it is a backlog. The reason the telecoms companies are doing well in South Africa is because blacks didn't have phones. Now they have phones, and it's a huge population that requires phones. And so this whole fiasco about that telecoms industry will never be the same again. But people had to be forced to do universal access, for example. But in the end, that condition has made the telecoms company to be as successful as we see them today.
Gloria Serobe, thank you very much indeed for coming in.